So that raises the question, what is a stateless society? Well, what is a state? And the way that I define a state is to say that, roughly speaking, there are, I guess you'd call them norms, ethical norms that any society recognizes as pretty much universal. By that, I mean, these are the very basic things, like the norm that people don't attack each other, that they don't steal from each other, things like that, things that almost anyone in society will agree with. When I say agree with, I mean that everyone in that society will probably go to great lengths to protect their those norms. They're committed to defending those rights that they believe that they have. And and with that in mind, the state is this one particular organization against which people, for whatever reason, do not protect their rights. They consider the state to have some sort of special authority to violate those rights. There may be other norms that they do hold the state to, but they don't hold the state to the same norms as they hold people in general in the society. And usually there's some justification for that it's necessary or that it's right or some combination of those. But I think that all of those justifications fall short. I think that the state as it actually exists is quite harmful and unnecessary. So I would like to have a society in which there is no such special organization, in which every single person is unconditionally treated with the same norms. Now, keep in mind that I'm not saying the question of what those norms should be is a whole other issue, and one that I concede is open to all sorts of interesting speculation and debate. But I consider that a separate issue to the issue of whether there should be a state or not.
Yeah, so now, so far, you and I are, we're exactly in agreement because you've so far covered the anarcho part of anarcho capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
How'd you get to the capitalism part, I think is where we're probably going to have an issue. But in theory, I would agree with almost everything you said about a stateless existence, although I would say you and I are probably we're going to differ on a few things, whether it's even the actual definition of capitalism or, are there inalienable rights versus property rights versus natural rights, which is, that's semantics and philosophy more than anything else. So I think it's
I'm happy to go into that if you want.
Yeah, no, we got nothing but time. I just figured we would, I wanted to say at least that, so far we're fairly on the same level on most.
Just to let you know, I've cleared up 2 hours, so you can get into as much detail as you want.
And you also didn't press mute on your phone, so you're killing it over there, Dylan. Yes, just the guy you want on your press team when you're a U.S. senator. Yes, well played, Dylan. Well played. So okay, so no, like I said, in theory, I would agree with the majority of what you said. I just think we're going to get to the capitalist part. It's going to get a little bumpy. So I will defer back to you, and we'll at least get to that. And then I think we should probably loop around and maybe sort of discuss basic terminology, make sure we're on the same wavelength with stuff. But I'll let you hit the second part first, and then we'll roll.
Sure. So what's the second part? Sorry.
The capitalist part of anarcho-capitalist.
Okay. So, right. I mean, so, yeah, I mean, this is often, anyone who's highly critical of capitalism, usually when we try to discuss anarcho-capitalism, we just end up coming back to me defending capitalism in general, and we never really get to the anarcho part.
Well, that's because you and I we really don't disagree on the anarcho part all that much. So
sure.
The rub is going to be the capitalist part, but I'm willing to look at it as more of an overarching combined thing. I'm not just going to beat up on capitalism.
So why don't we start, since we've got so much time, let's start by going into those moral fundamentals that you mentioned. Because I think my views tend to be kind of different than most libertarians even. I don't think there's any such thing as natural rights, at least not by any definition I've heard. I'm a moral anti-realist, I think is what most people would call me. So I don't believe that there's any sort of strict objective morality that you can find in the world or that you can calculate exactly. Rather, I think what we call morality is actually a couple of things. one of those things is a sort of visceral, emotional taste for things. There's things that sort of just disgust us or feel good to us or feel morally good to us for probably convoluted psychological reasons. And that's the sort of less interesting aspect of morality, I think, for this conversation. But the more interesting aspect is what I call the fairness aspect of morality. The sort of rules about what rights we have with respect to other people. And I think that what that actually is for real is more like that those are concepts that we use to negotiate with each other for the purposes of cooperation. They're sort of, I guess, strategies. If you're, say you're buying a car or something and you're haggling about the price, you might argue that the right price is like a certain number because it's a round number, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But like, why is a round number the right price for a car? Well, it obviously isn't. But the idea is that because it's this sort of uniquely special number, it's a likely place for you to come to an agreement on with the person you're haggling with. And so it gives them a way, since you both want to come to an agreement, that gives you a sort of thing to focus on in order to reach an agreement. And to a great extent, the sort of fairness, the principles of fairness that we think are sort of fundamental are really these kind of just things that we've managed to come to an agreement on in order to cooperate, because that's ultimately what we want to do.
Okay, I'm pretty good with that. You're talking about a philosophical difference between morality and fairness, and that's I'm okay with that. I'm more concerned with, if we're going to talk about like basic stuff would be, and I know this sounds ludicrously basic, but for what it's worth, I've gone to Anarcho a bunch of times. I've had this conversation with Larkin and other people. So like, I've gone down this path before, and the last time I had this conversation with somebody, it took 11 hours to agree on what the definition of capitalism was. So maybe we should start with the basics.
If it makes it any easier, I'm ultimately not too concerned about the custody over particular words, right? Like if we can't agree on what capitalism means, then we should just not use the word capitalism, because I can always break down what I'm talking about in more specific terms until we're using terms that we both agree on.
Okay. Well, I think it's good because this way you have a basis where two people are talking about the same thing, rather than we spend an hour and a half talking about the foibles of anarcho-capitalism because of the capitalist side, and then it turns out that you don't actually think capitalism has anything to do with the state, and then it turns out we have been arguing different, I've been arguing lemons and you've been arguing apples for the last hour and a half. So like I don't want that to be a thing. So that's why I usually start with capitalism. Then I start with property rights versus private property versus personal property, and then into property rights, because I think those three things are essentially the bitch of the bunch.
Yep.
And I think once you have all those three, then you're discussing things on an equal footing, and you're using the same terminology, and this way you're speaking the same language. Like, so that's usually like my three starting points. I think those are fair places to start. So. Pitch of the bunch. Give me the elevator pitch. What's your capitalism?
Right. So, I mean, as you pointed out, usually a disagreement comes down to what people should be allowed to own. I think that people should be generally allowed to own pretty much anything. And the actual details of how you decide what ownership means admittedly there's some arbitrary details to work out on the edges. It's not this entirely crystal clear concept, but usually it's fairly straightforward. Usually in most societies, people have kind of worked out what ownership means for most cases that matter. And I think that that society that allows everything to be owned privately is generally the best way to support collaboration and cooperation and avoid conflict, and to make sure that resources are being used in an efficient way.
Okay, so I now know we have different definitions of both capitalism and what is personal property versus what is private property. So I guess we'll have to iron these two out. Which again, this is good because then when we're on the same length, we're good. So my standard opening salvo on the argument against whether it's anarcho-capitalism or it's a capitalist state where the elite or the majority of the ownership of capitalists are the ones who have the power and thus make the majority of market determinations by themselves through sheer brute force of the percentage of ownership. So I guess we'll go with the basic and we'll see where you are with the basic one. So the standard capitalist definition would be economic and or political economic system where trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit, as opposed to a state. Is that somewhat fair?
Yeah, I mean, the part of the end, like for profit, is kind of superfluous. I'm happy to just say that people can own things, and owning it means that you control it and you can do whatever you want with it. People want to use it for profit, that's up to them. But there's no need to mandate that as part of the philosophy.
Well, I would assume that there's no purpose to interact with a capitalist system unless you're doing so to derive profitability. I mean, what else?
Well, I mean, people own things for
capitalism?
reasons other than profit. Some people just consume property.
Well, that's the difference between personal property and private property, which is the other one. So, and this is the big one that I think a lot of people don't get. So, personal property versus private property. Personal property is basically anything that you can purchase, anything you can possess, anything that you can own that you can take with you. That's personal property. Private property, such as what capitalism enforces, private property. Private property is any immovable property, which is land, homes, farms, mineral rights, mining rights, water rights. Those are private property. And in a normal capitalist system, the reason why there's a differentiation between private property and personal property would be because any accrual of private property, and again, that's land, mining rights, et cetera, require an agreement with the state, because technically the state or the government or the country, however you want to look at it, ultimately essentially has dibs on land rights. Like essentially the government out libertarians by calling dibs first. And in standard libertarianism, it's dibs. If you call dibs and you put your hand on it first, then you own it and now you have property rights to it. That's pretty, okay. I mean, it's a little snarky for me to say so, but ultimately like that's what we're talking about. Because if you go, back in time, the first libertarian was the first guy who saw something and said dibs. Like, right.
So actually I would disagree that
as an economic system.
Right. I disagree that most libertarians support that dibs system. I found like what I support, and what I'm pretty sure most libertarians support, is the concept of some kind of concept of homesteading, so that it's not enough to just plant a flag in some land or something and say this is mine. You actually have to make some sort of productive use of unclaimed land in order to say that you own it. Now, of course, defining exact.
Why would you have to do that? Why does it matter? You just said it doesn't matter. Before we were talking about capitalism, you said, like when I said it's a system for profit, and you said, no, it doesn't have to be for profit. You can do whatever you want with it. So why all of a sudden now, if you have private property, you're saying that you have to physically improve it or work it or, do something with it? Like
this would be in order to, if you have a bunch of land that is unowned by anyone, just allowing anyone to say to just claim all of the unowned land that they can possibly know exists obviously doesn't make sense, because so one person would instantly claim an entire piece of land. So you need some way of restricting the rate at which that land is sort of claimed by people. And so the best way to do that is some kind of principle, like, well, you get to claim the land that you actually have some sort of use for. It could be, you could say productive use. You could say like you're going to live there or something, but not I'm going to claim this entire kingdom and claim and rule the entire thing. That's just not a very good system, letting people claim land in that way. So obviously the rules for that.
I agree that it's not a good system. That's why we're here.
So obviously the rules for homesteading or claiming land are tricky to define, right? There's a lot of arbitrary aspects there. Fortunately, it tends to be fairly clear in history, like which people are claiming land for the purposes of saying this is a nation that I rule, and which people are claiming it for the purposes of saying this is my private land that I live on or farm or something. Most of the time, that's fairly clear. And now we seem to be at a point where most of land has been claimed, and at this point, there's no need to. I don't think there's any need to have any ongoing conditions of like every land is claimed and owned by someone at this point.
Well, by governments, not by individuals.
No, by individuals.
How? Individuals don't own land.
Well, I guess there's quite about there's a lot of land that's just unowned by any individual and just is owned by the government. So I guess in an Ancap society, you'd have to again come up with some sort of homesteading criteria to decide who owns that land. But we need to do that anyway if governments are going to do anything with it.
So, all right. I'm just trying to, like I said, put it all into place. So I know we're like relatively close. Hold on. And I just watched my wife put on headsets to watch TV through the Xbox. And now I know what I look like when I'm sitting on the couch doing it. Sorry. It was a very sobering moment. Okay. So capitalism, economic system, where it's, individuals or groups of individuals as opposed to a government, but everything is controlled by, quote, private owners. It's private ownership. Would that be, again, I want to make sure that we're stiff on private ownership.
Yeah, I mean, everything is founded on the idea of private ownership. So, I mean, there's all sorts of ways that once someone owns a piece of land, they could then delegate control to groups or all sorts of interesting organizational structures, but they would need to, their authority to do that would have to be based on their private ownership of the land ultimately.
Okay, so private ownership of the land then requires that everybody else collectively, technically in the entire world, has to accept or approve of or validate your ownership of said thing, because now there are no governments. So it's not like, oh, well, I own a house in, Nebraska, which is in America. So my property rights are protected and guaranteed by the United States of America, to whom I pay taxes, so that I can say I own this land, even though I really don't, because the government does. So my question becomes then, who becomes like you literally have to get like permission from every other person in the world to say, yes, we acknowledge that you own this. Wouldn't that
not
be,
every other person,
especially without a government?
You would need a mostly accepted norm where most people in the society agree that this is what ownership means. If you have that, then you can then what you're left with is basically a small handful of people who they would call criminals who want to violate property rights, and then you need a way of basically stopping them from doing that by force, because those are the people, for whatever reason, don't want to recognize property rights.
This is where we get into private militias.
No, I don't know what you call them, militia, but I would call them security companies or rights enforcement agencies, which would be the private equivalent to the police. And whose rights are they enforcing? Their customers, the people who hire them.
Okay, so then would it be fair to say that every single individual property owner would have their own individual thresholds, and ergo every single security company that worked for every single individual may or may not have a completely different directive or set of standards?
No, I mean, obviously that wouldn't work.
There is no codified agreement because there is no government and there is no state, i.e. there is no codification of rules.
Well, there would have to be a codified agreement. So obviously you can't have two different people enforcing different standards for rights, and if they're going to live together in the same society. You can't have different security companies having different ideas of rights, or at least not in the same. They have to, or at least if they do have different rights, they have to agree on when those rights are applied or whatever. So you would always need to have agreements between security companies about how they're going to resolve conflicts between them, and what set of laws they're going to use to resolve those conflicts.
Laws?
Mm-hmm.
What set of laws?
That's right.
So you're going to make and enforce laws without a government or an enforcement arm of a government.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's just mystically on the same page and chill? Is that like the basic theory that this
Not
only
mystic
works
at
if there's overwhelming agreement for one thing?
I mean, the security companies would have to figure out those laws, and those laws would be what they sell to their customers. Like, we will enforce your right to own property, to not be beaten up, and various other things. And there'd be various conditions for what the punishments are, how they'll enforce it. But of course, in order to be able to actually offer those rights to their customers, they have to reach agreements with other security companies to mutually recognize those laws, so that when there's a dispute between the security companies, they know what laws they're following. They can get an arbitrator to resolve the dispute between their two customers according to those laws. So security companies have a very strong incentive to do this. You're not in the business of fighting each other in wars. They want to provide security for people, and they can only do that if they reach treaties to cooperate on this.
Our wars are profitable. Every single war in the history of humanity has proven that. So why would a profit-driven society and a group that solely
who are wars profitable for? They're not profitable for the people who have to pay for it.
Have you ever seen a country fight a war and not be profitable? Like, literally every single time our economy lags, the first thing we do is declare war and drop $1 trillion worth of bombs to stimulate the economy.
But we don't get richer from fighting that war. We lose money on the resources.
No, you and I don't get richer. The capitalists
right.
who own the bomb manufacturing plants and the gun manufacturing plants and the ammunition manufacturing, they make a lot of money, i.e. the people who profit are the capitalists.
Indeed.
So in your society where there is no government and it's only capitalists, and capitalists are the one who profit from wars, ergo, war in Ancapistan would be
some businesses,
like the peak.
Some businesses profit off of war, particularly the ones who supply the resources, the guns and the planes and stuff for the war. But the money to pay those companies comes from the government, and the government gets their money from the people. And the people don't have a choice about whether to pay the government to buy those bombs and planes and guns. The difference is that if you just have a security company, they're not taxing anyone for their money. They get all their revenue from the customers who choose to hire them to provide security to them. So any money they spend on a war is coming out of their own pockets. That's minus the profits that they get to make. And people don't pay security companies to fight each other. They pay them to maintain peace. So security company that's fighting a war with any security companies that are fighting wars with each other are going to be losing a lot of money and losing a lot of customers at the same time. So it's not a very sustainable strategy.
Okay, so general query then. So if you have a whole bunch of armed security forces who are technically beholden to no one other than a loose social agreement with other security companies to roughly provide the same service or the same
level.
Loose.
It would probably be quite explicit.
Well, to have it be but again, codification requires laws.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
laws
they would
require
write
government.
No, why do laws require government? I mean, laws are just
who enforces
formalized
the
rules.
A law without enforcement is like mental masturbation. It's just like,
well, the security companies enforce them, and then you probably have arbitration companies that resolve disputes. So some roughly equivalent to a court.
So what you're saying is that the groups of armed people are the ones who decide shit.
What do you mean by decide shit? I mean, they're selling the rights. They're selling the rights as a product. And their product is people are paying them to buy that product. So I mean, their money comes from the people paying them to protect their rights.
So basically, they make laws. they make laws because they're the ones who all meet and agree upon rules of engagement. They're the ones who agree on what you can or cannot do. They're the ones who agree on what is or is not moral. They're the ones who agree, what you can and cannot do in an armed conflict between the two armed groups. So basically,
well, you say they're the ones who agree, but this is the product that they're selling. So, I mean, they have to create rights that people will want to buy.
Well, it's not a product, it's a service.
Okay, a service.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because products require manufacturing, which require individual labor. Service only requires an agreement.
Okay. I mean, they do require labor, I assume.
Why not? My service is that I'm a security company who just vaguely threatens people and doesn't actually do any labor. So,
well, I mean, it's not going to be a very successful security company. Who would pay a security company to do that?
Well, so the alternative is that then you're paying a company to go kill people.
Well, who's paying a company to go kill people and why? And how would that? And how would that be profitable for anyone?
Okay, you have a piece of property. I have a piece of property. We're both ANCAPs. I have more money than you, so I can hire 3 times as many armed goons as you. I then decide that I actually had dibs on your property, and your property is my property.
Right.
I have 3 times as many armed goons as you.
Well, I mean, how much
your property is now my property?
I mean, how much can you actually, how much can you actually take from me by hiring armed goons? Is it going to be worth the cost? Even if I can, I have less armed goons, is it going to be worth the cost of fighting my armed goons to get whatever it is you think you're going to get from me, rather than just buying it from me?
Of course it is, because now I own my shit and
sure?
your shit, so I own twice as much shit.
But you had to pay, to have a war with my security company to get that shit.
Yeah, but
I'm willing to pay a lot of money to stop you. The thing is, if my property is worth $100, I'm going to pay more than $100 to stop you from taking it, because
then obviously, because I'm a capitalist and I know that you're going to spend X number.
And if I'm paying more than $100, then you're going to have to pay more than $100 to defeat my $100 worth of security, which means that you're losing money on the whole deal.
But it doesn't matter, because I gain power. I gain leverage. What
do you mean you gain leverage?
I now own more property, and the more property I own, the more effect I have on.
But you lost money though. You paid more than $100 to get $100.
But now I can make money off your profit. I'm spending money short to make profit long, which is
but I can make money off of my property too. Well, I have it, so there's no. You're not going to get it.
My point being is that all ANCAPs don't have the same amount of money. Ergo, all ANCAPs do not have the same size of a private security company. I mean, is that fair to say? Because you guys aren't a socialist. You're not anarcho-socialists, where everybody would have roughly the same amount of stuff. You're anarcho-capitalist. Ergo, the people who are better at capitalism accrue more property and more wealth. Ergo, those people can purchase more armed goons than other people who have less profitability or less property. Would that not be correct?
There's a couple problems with that. So first of all, you just need to buy enough security to protect the value of the property that you own, which is usually, it's not going to be that much. It's like a little bit more money than the property you own. Second of all, in order to, the problem is as you acquire wealth, when you're rich, all of your wealth is not like a bunch of gold in your pocket, right? Your wealth is
you're talking about equity.
Your legal claim to ownership of a whole bunch of resources that are all over the place. You own this factory over there. You own this bank account over there. And all of your claims of ownership of all these things depend on some sort of system to defend your right to own those things, right? The only reason you can go and what exactly? So the only reason you can go to the bank and say, "Give me this money," is because the bank recognizes your legal claim over that money. Now, if the rights enforcement agency were to make a deal with the bank, it says, "Hey, if we have a legal claim against a particular person, as decided by these particular, well-respected arbitrators or whatever, then you will actually, just transfer the money to us, and because we're, it's a legal claim, we're going to pay it to some victim who's made a complaint against them, and we'll pay you like some small fee for the right to do that. Now, if the bank,
who's enforcing these laws?
The rights enforcers.
And who's hiring the rights enforcers?
Well, everyone who wants security.
So what you're saying is a whole bunch of capitalists who have money agree upon a centralized authority to enforce laws.
Nothing centralized. You can have, there's multiple rights enforcement agencies.
We could have 1,000 rights enforcement agencies, and they could all enforce different rights to different levels.
Well, they can enforce entirely different rights because, like I say, they have to be consistent. They can't. They have to be able to resolve conflicts between them because those are going to happen. So they'll have to work out treaties with each other to agree on compatible sets of rights that they can enforce. Right. So you can't promise someone the right to take any stuff that they want, because obviously you can't promise that right to all of your customers at the same time. Right. You can't promise customer A that they can have customer B stuff and customer B they have customer A stuff, obviously.
Why not?
So you have to tell them, we'll protect your right to your own stuff, but you can't take other people's stuff.
This is the part that I don't
because
get.
it's not
is usually for me, this is where the breakdown on the Ancapistan thing is. This is usually the breakdown for me, which is and I get it. And again, you and I are on the same page on a lot of stuff. Stateless existence, no centralized authority. I'm not disagreeing with you on any of this. Like if I were to support socialism, it would be a non-state socialism. It would be a collectivism, so to speak. Like, so, it's just not my jam. But this is like the bitch of the bunch, like where the rubber meets the road on the Ancapistan thing is that it seems that it's always built upon everybody's going to behave, everybody is going to come to mutual agreement, conflicts will be worked out, peacefully and through mediation and arbitration. But meanwhile, like, if I literally have the biggest pile of money, I can hire the most goons and I can go take other people's shit.
Yeah, you can't though. I mean, okay,
why?
So,
what's stopping me? A code of morality? There's no morality. We're capitalists. There's no ethical consumption.
No, the security people they hire to stop you. And I mean,
but if I have more, if you have
it's not that you can't do that.
And I have 5 Sherman tanks.
It's that you can't make money off of it.
How can I not make money? You make money off of it. Why can't I make money off of it?
What do you mean I don't make money off of it? The problem is
property that you don't make money off of, but you're going to spend money to protect. That seems like a poor investment, and that would be poor capitalism.
Well, people do that all the time. Like people
Why do they do that? So that they can retain
people
their
pay
land.
for
Why?
security to protect their house because
their land
on their
right
house.
because it has value.
Yeah.
I can take your land and then use your land as equity to acquire more bank loans. So even if I'm not using your land to actively profit, i.e. I'm not putting a business on your land that I've taken, I'm not raping the resources off your land that I am taking.
But you can't.
I'm merely going to take your land. Why not? I have more goons.
Because I will spend like pretty much close to the value of my land to stop you from taking it. And the destruction that will result from that conflict will be more than the value of the land to you. Right?
No, well, maybe in the short term, but not in the long term.
In any term, like any long-term thing you can do with the land, I can do with the land too, and use the extra money to defend it. Right? Like you're never going to catch up.
No, but this is what I'm talking about. We're talking about this hypothetical. In your hypothetical, you seem to think that you have as much money as me, or you have as much money as anybody else who has money. And frankly, if you're in a society where everybody has the same amount of money, congratulations, you're a socialist. What the hell are we talking about? Because are you telling me in a capitalist system, everybody has roughly the same amount of capital?
No, not at all.
Logical?
Clearly.
No. Okay, so some people have more capital than others.
A lot of money doesn't allow you to steal from people. Not generally.
It allows me. Does it allow me to purchase more armed goons? Yes or no? Security companies. Sorry, not armed goons. If I have more capital than you, if I have more money than you, if I have more property than you, would you agree that I can then hire more armed security than you can because I have more capital and more money and more resources?
What are you going to hire them to do? It depends.
It doesn't matter. I can hire them because I have money.
But if you want to hire these people to break the law, so first of all, if you break the law, you're going to lose control of the things you allegedly own, right? Because you depend on this system in order to own anything, in order to be rich, right?
No, I don't. I depend on the fact that I have more armed goons.
But what do you mean by have? Like, to own those goons means that those goons will do what you say. And you're just a person like them. For some reason, when you go and say, go do this, they do it. Why do they do that? They do it because you pay them. Now, how do you pay them? You take money from your huge bank account and give it to them. But if the bank is part of this network of rights enforcement, and they have a deal with some rights enforcer to recognize legal claims against you, just as banks do today with the state, right? Like if you get a legal judgment against you, the state, at least here in Canada, will just take money and write it out of your bank account. I mean, that same arrangement can exist in a decentralized system between a bank and private arbitrator. And they can take that money right out of your account. They don't even have to fight you or anything. You just don't have the money to pay any goons as soon as the judgment is passed against you. The reason the bank would go along with that is because A, they're going to pay them a little bit, and B, the bank's customers are satisfied that if the bank is only doing this for people who actually have legitimate criminal judgments against them, and if most of their customers are not criminals, then they'll be okay with that. They'll trust the bank that's not going to give their money away. Just like we do.
I've hit that. And I'm not.
It is
again I want to remind everybody in chat. See, we're having like a chill talk. Sorry, there's a lot of talk beforehand where people are like, "It's gonna be a bloodbath." Like I wanted to have a rational conversation about this. So just in case anybody in chat's wondering, no, this is usually the wall that I beat up against, and I had the same problem with Larkin, the same problem with other people. Like, is essentially when I hear ANCAPs, when you start getting real granular on your theory. Basically, what you're describing is everything that we have now, only the word government is replaced by private consortium or some such other term that's government, but you don't actually call it government because now you're talking about laws, you're talking about legal enforcement, you're talking about property rights that are being maintained through somebody who is of neither of the two parties that are conflicted about the property in question. So
it's similar to what we have.
You're either talking about like modern government, or you're talking about feudalism. You're talking about one or the other. It's
similar to what we have now. The key difference is that there's no monopoly. The government has a monopoly on the justice system, on providing rights enforcement through police and dispute arbitration through the courts. The difference is that there is no state with a monopoly on that. You can have multiple businesses providing those services, and with the extra complication that they have to negotiate treaties so that they can resolve disputes between rights enforcement agencies and decide which arbitration agencies to use. If you want an analogy that demonstrates how this actually works, consider say two friendly countries like America and Canada. Each has their own legal system with slightly different laws. Each has their own separate government. There's no central government that arbitrates disputes between them, and yet they are able to resolve disputes across the border. So if someone Canadian breaks the law in America, or vice versa, or whatever, there is a set of rules in place and treaties to figure out, who does what and who enforces what and which courts you tried in and which police do what.
We have that now. That now. It's
exactly. That's my point. And that happens now, even with no central authority controlling both of them. They're just two separate authorities that have negotiated treaties between them to resolve disputes, and it works. And no one's really too worried about the U.S. and Canada going to war over that, right? So that's just showing you that the concept works. There is some proof of concept of this in existence today. So now imagine two different countries that are in that situation.
If you don't have governments, they're not countries.
Well, let's take it one step at a time. Imagine the U.S. and Canada in some future enlightened time agree to erase the border between the countries. And so there's no physical America and Canada. there's just one big piece of land and two governments sharing the jurisdiction. They get along so well that they can do that. And the way it works is that you can just choose to be American. Okay, go ahead.
Here's the problem. All the hypotheticals of libertarian and ANCAP philosophy all start with the hypothetical that everybody has agreed to get along. Everybody has agreed to follow the same rules. There's been arbitration and everybody decided we're totally not going to be dicks and beat you up and steal your shit or undercut you in the free market or pay goons to come kill you. But that's like a ridiculous premise, because in the real world, where there's shitty governments, which again, I agree, shitty governments. Yeah. But they're enforced at the end of 5,600 nuclear warheads and a state military that has like $1.5 billion annual budget. Like that's what it isn't. It isn't mutual respect that keeps bad shit from happening. It's the specter of mutually assured destruction that keeps bad shit from happening.
I mean, that's not what keeps the people within a society from,
no, but you're talking about two external societies.
You don't have to nuke criminals to stop them from robbing your house. You just need some, a few police who are willing to come and arrest them. And it's...
But again, arrest them. If there is no government and there is no laws, then how the fuck does somebody
there are police.
have the right to kidnap me, imprison me, judge me? Why does your private company get to kidnap me and imprison me and decide what my term in your corporate prison should be? That's nonsensical and arbitrary again. And again, we can't say, well, there will be 4,000 security companies across America and they're all going to agree on roughly the same thing. Like, if you're telling me that like 40 groups of armed goons backed with money are going to decide what is and is not a crime, and then they're all going to agree on what the penalty for those specific crimes should be, and then they're all going to equally enforce those crimes, that's government.
So we have an agreement now there's lots of different police forces across the country, and they all manage to avoid fighting wars with each other. They do that through this system that we have of having a central government that makes laws. And then we have this sort of convoluted system of voting for them and voting politicians, and they negotiate with each other to work out the laws and blah, blah, blah. I'm not seeing per se what is the essence of that system that allows it to work. Whereas you think that a system of independent of rights enforcement agencies, separate companies can't negotiate between them the rules that they agreed that they both follow, the same way that Canada and America have through treaties.
Okay. So this is a fair question. Okay. So, okay. Sorry, I'm really old. Everything's crackling. Okay. So what is it that would keep governmental America and Canada from killing each other that wouldn't hold true in an ANCAP version of America and Canada, where they're ruled by private individuals and corporations and CEOs instead of democratically elected officials who every 2 to 4 years can be voted out of office and then lose all their power? Is that what you're asking me the difference between the two is? Because that's the fucking difference. That's literally
what do you mean by ruled? I mean... When you say ruled, I think of like a single ruler who claims to make all the rules for everyone, but that's not what I'm proposing.
But if everybody is coming together and agreeing upon the rule of law, and then everybody is...
They're reaching an agreement eventually through negotiation and through market forces, and that they have to sell these laws to their customers. And they have to reach treaties with each other to resolve disputes with those laws. So this creates incentives to make laws, that their customers will like, that the customers will be happy to live by, which means they're going to protect the customers' rights, and that they have to be consistent with each other. So they can't have rights. They can't give the customers rights that conflict with each other. They
but
also
I don't understand why, though. You're talking about it's literally a code of
because
honor.
how would they enforce that? Like if you promise one customer if you promise each customer they can steal from the other customer, you can't implement those laws.
Well, again, because the problem is that this is all under best case scenario, or under it's all good, or hey, we all pretty much universally agree, so it's chill because we're practically utopic, and this is what we think. Like, again, let's just, in your scenario where America and Canada are corporations rather than countries, it's a whole bunch of individuals who have a whole bunch of different corporate stakes and a whole bunch of different pieces of property who have all somehow agreed to a mutual set of laws and rules and enforcements that somehow is not government. Okay, let's just say that's a thing, right? That's the standard premise of the hypothetical. So let's say out of all the property owners in America, all of these private individuals who all have their own money and all hire private security firms, let's just say there's like a group at 10% of those capitalists, and they decide, I really like moose, so I'm just going to go take all of Canada's property because they have all the mooses. Okay, let's just say I got a hard on for mooses. Let's just say that I want to control the moose market. Okay, I want to be able to have a monopoly on mooses. Just whatever the fuck it is. What is to stop me from spending a shit ton of money, hiring a bunch of security forces, and using them to go take my shit? Well, your shit that will now be my shit, or Canada's shit that will now be my shit. Like in the real, in our current, I don't want to say in the real world because it sounds snarky. In our current existence, that would not happen, because if one government tried to go invade another government, especially two neighboring countries, especially two white neighboring countries in the same hemisphere, number one, you'd have mutually assured destruction. Because they both have hundreds of allies they could call in who have billions of tons of nuclear armament, Scud missiles, ICBMs, fucking satellite death rays, whatever the hell it is. And governments can make agreements between each other. A collective of people versus a collective of people, neither of which who have a central government, it would take eons for them to come to a mutual agreement on both sides, then pass that agreement back and forth to every single individual within both of those communities, and then have everybody hash out within their individual communities what they like. Bring back, like you see what I'm saying? Like, without the centralization, I will literally go and take all of Canada's shit with my armed goons, and the amount of time it takes everybody else to sit down and discuss what they may or may not do about the fact that I may or may not be stealing all of Canada's mooses, because I may or may not have more armed goons than anybody else. Like, because laws are not enforceable if you don't have a centralized agency. And just replacing president for CEO and country for corporation doesn't change that basic setup. It's still you're talking about the same exact thing. The only difference is the capitalist rules by however much money they have. Whereas no matter how fucked up government is, you still got to go out and win those votes every 2 to 4 years. And if you don't, your power is instantly stripped. If you're a CEO in Ancapistan and you do something shitty, who's going to come strip you of your power?
But your capital, your money is instantly stripped if you turn on the system, right? Like I say, you need these mechanisms to own all that capital, because owning that capital just means that if you tell the bank what to do with that money, then they'll listen to you. And the reason they listen to you is because they recognize that you're the legal owner. So as soon as you start breaking the laws, as in breaking the laws that the bank has agreed to, made deals with rights enforcement agencies to respect, then you just don't own that money anymore. So like you hire an army and you say, we're going to invade some area. And as soon as that you attack some person in that area, okay, well, they're going to call their rights enforcement agency. They're going to file a dispute or whatever. This person attacked me. I'm suing them for millions of dollars. They're going to go to an arbitration agency. They'll decide for that person. Yeah, this person definitely attacked you. The arbitrator will go to the bank and said, we have a claim against this person. And the bank will be like, okay, this all this money is now this other person's, according, we have a deal with this arbitrator to do that. So like by turning on the system, you are no longer wealthy.
I want to stop this quick. I don't know what happened, but we're currently sitting at about 500 viewers. So I appreciate whoever hosted me. I'm going to assume it's Vosh because it's always Vosh. Thank you for the host, Vosh. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Vosh, I'm ActTV. Holler at your boy. Sorry, what's going on? Where were we? Sorry, I have no idea what that looks like. My page is de-indexed. We're completely invisible. You can't even find us. So the fact that you have somebody off-site pouring 400 people onto your page boggles my mind because I can't get Twitch to show my page to 20 people.
Your channel does show up as online. It's just not sorted to the top.
Yeah, so you have to dig through 6 other offline channels. But if you look on mobile, we don't exist, where it shows channels you follow that are online and it's like squares. We don't
Twitch actually does that
at all. We're de-indexed. I watched it happen to Bernie Sanders last night for like half an hour before he popped from the bottom of the list, like underneath people to the top. We just don't ever index.
See, more evidence. And you just need to say good things about you have to get it to the top, man. I'm telling you, man. I send them gift baskets every week, man. It works perfectly.
You probably do. So again, my main issue with this is that there's no immediate accountability to a CEO, to a private property owner, to a corporation, to a capitalist system if there is no government, because government and capitalism are inexorably linked, i.e. private property rights, i.e. codified laws. Like, these are all things that are enforced out of not out of morality. People don't go, oh, well, I'm not going to steal for you because it's not cool and I'm moral because I live in Ancapistan. No, they go, I would love to take your shit, but I really don't want to spend 8 to 12 years in a federal penitentiary. That's why.
The accountability.
But meanwhile, I could try to steal from you, and then if you come to try to get your property, oh, I just hire more armed goons. There you go. Now it's mutually assured destruction, and I'm not going to jail. Maybe we both die, but now I'm not going to prison. Like, there's a huge difference between those two things.
Yeah. I mean, the accountability comes from, first of all, the fact that these rights enforcement agencies are spending their own money, right? So any conflict that they want to get into is going to, they'll have to pay for the fighting, right?
Okay, I'm a capitalist. I have a lot of money. I have a lot of money. I'm a capitalist. I'm literally, I'm like Scrooge McDuck. I'm like taking like a bath in like a thing of gold doubloons. Okay,
but if you waste your money just fighting people, then you won't have a lot of money. The point is, then I'll have everything. Make money by just fighting people in the society.
You make money by taking people's shit, turning that into equity, and then using that equity to get more shit.
The cheapest way to get people's shit is to buy it from them, because they'll spend more than that to stop you from stealing it.
But you keep saying like, oh, well, my property's only worth $100, so you don't want to take it. But if you come to take it, I'm going to spend thousands of dollars on armed security. Well, you just said the property's only worth $100. Why would you hire thousands of dollars on private security?
Actually, you don't have
a property that's only worth $100. I don't get that.
Because the security company is not like, you don't pay for every single bullet that they shoot. Rather, you pay some monthly fee or something. And when you need security, they send whatever security you need, and they make the money on the assumption that most people don't need to have some people protecting them most of the time, which is true.
You think they're not charging you per bullet? What kind of shitty capitalists live in this hypothetical society driven by capital?
Well, would you hire that? I mean, I wouldn't hire a security company like that.
Well, what if all the security companies, because you said they all agree to follow the same strictures, what if all the security companies get together and they all go, hey, we're going to charge every motherfucker here by the bullet?
Well, then the first security company that decides not to do that is going to steal the entire market.
Or another security company could just kill them.
Why? I mean, then that they both lose money, and some security company that managed to stay out of that conflict would then create the product and steal the market. Like,
and then you
can't make money. Like, fighting another security company just costs you money and them money, but it's mutual destruction. It doesn't get you anything. It's much more profitable for you to cooperate with the other security companies, or at least as far as not getting into wars with them, right? Like, any security companies that fight each other are going to lose to the security companies that don't fight each other.
Right, but you keep saying stuff like mutually assured destruction or value of stuff or this and that. Again, this is all. A lot of this seems to be premised on there's a fair amount of equity in the amount of capitalism that everybody has. And I would once again proffer to you that if you live in a system where mystically everybody has roughly the same amount of capital and roughly the same amount of money, congratulations, your hypothetical place is called socialist, because
they don't need to be. It doesn't need to be that equitable. There can be huge wealth disparities, but the point is, even if you're wealthy, there's still no incentive for you to try and use your wealth to
there is
steal from people.
Power.
No, because it will cost you more. And like I say, your wealth is contingent on this system, and if you turn on it, you lose your wealth, just like you do now.
Power generates wealth.
What do you mean
That's
by
how
power?
that works.
What is power?
If I have power, if I have dominion, if I have ownership over more resources, if I take them by force.
But what is that ownership, right? Like the ownership is enforced by the rights enforcement agencies.
No, it's the property rights are enforced by whoever has the most money and whoever can hire the most goons. This has been the same thing throughout literally
you don't need
the
a lot
entirety of humanity. Like, this is not something new. Like, it has always been whoever has the most guns wins. That's literally how everything in our universe works. We can take whatever we want. How many countries?
I mean, America has more guns than Canada, and yet, so why hasn't America invaded Canada and stolen all our stuff?
Because at the moment it's not beneficial, but at any moment it could become beneficial. And
why isn't it? Well, if it's not beneficial, okay. I mean, why isn't it beneficial? According to your logic, if they have more stuff, I'm going
to tell you why it's not beneficial.
And it's profitable.
I'm going to tell you. This is why it's not beneficial for America to go and invade Canada. Because if public sentiment in America is against a war in Canada, and then America goes and attacks Canada, all the people in America vote out all the politicians who wanted war, and then those politicians go from being powerful to having no power. Do you not agree? Is that not a thing? Is that literally not how the government works?
What if it was popular? What if Americans were like, yeah, okay, let's invade Canada?
If and when that day happens, I can assure you that America's
what if they said,
is going to become
let's invade Canada if it's dominated to us? Like, the point is it? Let's just assume America and Canada were like individual people. Would it actually be profitable for America to invade Canada?
If they were each one person?
Yeah.
That
keep in mind, like we do there's a massive amount of trade between America and Canada. Actually, I don't know if it actually is. But it's kind of a weird example.
If I go and I own Canada, all my cities can trade amongst each other just as well as they did as when they were cities in two different countries. So no, there's no less profit if I just take Canada. There's no less profit to all my businesses.
But you'd have to fight a war. Like right now, America can buy stuff from Canada and they can trade with Canada. And we have all these trade relationships. I mean, if America fought Canada, you have to fight this war just to get whatever was left of those resources after the war. Like, you're not going to create anything by that. It's going to be cheaper to just buy stuff from us than to fight us to the death to take it, because we'll fight to the death to stop you from taking it. Right. It's like this idea that it's more profitable to fight someone than it is to trade with them doesn't make sense.
No. I didn't say it was more profitable. I said that more capital begets more power. That is what I said. And you're taking the entire power dynamic out of this as if human beings.
But what do you mean by power?
Are not intrinsically greedy, as if human beings do not intrinsically seek dominion over other humans, because they do. These are all things that happen.
But greedy doesn't.
The thing that
greedy and seek dominion are very different things. I don't think, by greedy, I just mean that people pursue their own interests. They want wealth and they want to consume things that make them happy. That's very different from wanting to have dominion over other people.
But if you have wealth, you use your wealth to buy power. That's what wealth is.
What do you mean by power? What is that power?
That power is ownership of more shit. The more shit I own, the more I can directly affect the market to benefit myself. I.e., if I go and I take Canada, now I control how much mooses cost. I've now just cornered the entire moose industry, the entire maple syrup industry, the entire long vowel industry, the entire red baggy pant industry. I now completely own and dominate all those fucking industries globally because I have taken Canada. That is a massive amount of power. Now I get to dictate what the price is on the market. I get to dictate the availability. I get to create artificial scarcity to pump up the price of it anytime I want. I can make people do my bidding by giving them my product for free or by not giving them access to my product if they don't do what I want. Do you not agree that the more of a market share you own of something, regardless of whether you take it by force or by purchase, the more of the market share of something you own, the more you can dominate the market for that specific product or service?
I don't mean, but I mean, that's by definition true. The more of a market share you own, the more you dominate it. But I don't know what your point is. Like, why don't people do that?
My point is you're asking me, but in this ANCAP society, why would, and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to take your shit. And you're like, but why would somebody take my shit? And I'm explaining to you why I would take your shit.
I know why they wanted to have your shit, but I'm saying, how could they take it in a way that would be cheaper than buying it from you in the society, given that there are these services that protect your property and that you can hire those services to stop them from doing it, and that you're willing to pay enough to, like, more than the value of your shit to stop them. And the thing is, you don't even have to do that, because when the security company is going to have a large reserve of security forces to help you in the event that you need it. Like, we pay right now about $54 per month per person in America for the entire justice system. That's the cost of the entire justice system. So police, courts, prisons, everything. $54 a month. That's not too much. And so obviously, if when you actually need the police, you're going to get on that day, if someone's trying to kill you, you're going to have tons of police cars show up. You're going to get more than $54 worth of protection at once. But that's fine, because the police don't have to do that every day. They do it maybe once or twice in your life. Similarly, a security company that's giving you rights enforcement, the best deal, the deal that people would actually want to buy, is an insurance type deal where you just pay a monthly fee. And when you need the security, they promise to come and provide it for you as much as you need to protect your rights. And they can still do that and make a profit, because the same way insurance makes a profit, because a little bit of money over your whole life adds up to a lot. And most people never need to use it.
We call that a breakage system.
Breakage?
That's called it's called a breakage system in marketing and sales. That's generic. Yeah, that's okay. Capitalism. That's a breakage system, which is, like, let's say if you offer a money back guarantee on something, you can afford to do that because only an X number % of people are going to take you up on it. And if more than an X number % of people do take you up on it, then your system breaks. That's why it's called a breakage system. Another word for it is called a pyramid scheme or a Ponzi scheme.
Well, it's not a pyramid scheme to provide a service that people just don't need all the time. Like,
but why am I paying for it all the time?
It's not deceptive to say that we'll offer you.
That's horrible capitalism. That's horrible capitalism. Why would I pay for something every day of every month when
you're paying for security? So that you pay for security. So you pay a monthly fee so that when you're actually the victim of a crime or you're in danger, you can call the police and they'll come and protect you. You don't need the police every day. Why would you wouldn't want to call the police every day? Of course not.
Well, I would never call the police because I'm not a bootlegger.
Well, you never call your private security company every day.
Well, I mean, but they would be my private security company as opposed to everybody's security. Ergo, they listen to me and they do.
No, there are many people's security. They provide, like, you wouldn't make much money with one customer. You want to have like large numbers of customers to make it profitable so that your security forces can go protecting people who need it.
But how are they protecting me if they're not on my property every day?
Well, they don't need to be. You call the same way that police protect you. You don't have police on everyone's property all the time.
And that's why the police,
a phone number you can call to get the police to come.
That's why the police don't protect property. They only sometimes get it back for you after the fact. The police don't keep people from killing people. The police just sometimes find the murderer afterwards. So if state police don't offer actual real-time protection, then neither would a security force that you pay every month that you only actually see once or twice out of the month, even though you're paying them every day. Does that not make sense?
Okay, so you pointed out that I think correctly that in the current system, police seem more focused on punishing criminals rather than preventing crimes in the first place. I think that's true.
Because
I think that is partly due to the fact that it's just easier and it's just difficult to prevent crimes before they happen than it is to respond afterwards. But I also think that there's very much an incentive. We're missing incentives to prevent crime, because police are rewarded for catching criminals and prosecuting them, and they're funded for that, whereas they're not really funded for preventing crime. In this system, where the security companies want to spend as little money as possible actually chasing around criminals and arresting them, so they have an incentive to keep you safe, to keep you safe from crime, to prevent crime from happening in the first place. So they might very well send you like security cameras for your house. Okay, like this part of this package is you have to install the security system in your house, and these cameras to monitor your front lawn or whatever, because we would rather not have to send police out to help you, because that costs money. So it's much cheaper to help prevent that crime in the first place. So at least they'd have an incentive to do it. Now, it still wouldn't guarantee that no crime could be committed against you. I don't know of any system that can do that, but at least they'd have an incentive to do it. Whereas in the current system, they don't, right? So in that sense, it would be a superior system, I think.
I think that the only thing that prevents people from committing crime is the threat of state punishment after the fact.
Well, there's punishment here too.
But I don't understand how there is. If I have enough money, I can buy my way out. Let's say I go and I have a lot of money and I have all my security forces and I go and I jack a whole bunch of your shit. And then you call your security company, and the security company calls 20 other security companies, and they call the arbitration company who calls the enforcement company, and all these corporations come together and they go, oh, we're going to put you in corporate jail now because you stole his corporate stuff. And then I just spend a lot more money on armed goons. Go ahead. Come and arrest me. What was it you were talking about before? Mutually assured destruction? Was that what you were talking about?
How are you can't spend money on armed goons to stop them. Like they have more goons than you, and they can take your money. They can literally just walk to the bank and get your money that you're going to spend on these goons, right?
So what you just said was whoever has the most armed goons wins and gets to dictate. That's what you just said.
No. I mean, yeah, but you can't afford goons by committing crime with them. It's profitable to protect people because that's what people want to pay for. And whereas trying to commit crime is something that no one wants to happen. So the whole system is the whole system is structured to make that unprofitable. I mean, there's just no way to do it because people will pay to. I don't know how to explain this any better.
Like I am trying. Like I'm not being a dick. I'm actually trying to like wrap my head around.
Fair enough.
This. Like
it is not simple. And yeah, I'm doing my best to sort of explain it.
I mean, I get where you're going, but like this is the fundamental pitfall. This is usually where walking on the trail to Ancapistan, you fall into a deep gorge, like 3/4 of the way there.
I mean, it's crystal clear to me, right? Like it makes sense.
But here's why: because it makes sense to you because there's a set of preconceived notions that go into your makeup of this, which is all the security companies will meet and agree on a fairly unified code of conduct, and then all the capitalists
but lots of companies do that already
will also agree upon a code of conduct, and then everybody will follow that code of conduct.
I mean, why is that unbelievable?
Is that your system requires infinite, ultimate unity at all times for it to continue succeeding. Like,
it just requires a certain amount.
Apparently, nobody can buy enough power to beat
all it
up
requires
everybody else.
is some degree of collaboration and cooperation, agreeing on laws between companies, and we see lots and lots of examples of this actually happening today. Right? We have technical companies that get together and make hugely complicated standards that they all agree to follow, and that works just fine. Like the reason we're talking to each other now on maybe different kinds of computers is because of like millions of pages of technical standards that companies in vicious competition with each other have come together and agreed to follow in detail because it's to their mutual benefit to do so. There's tons and tons of examples of different industries coordinating in complicated ways when it's to their mutual benefit. And it is,
And
in this case, to their
invariably, one
mutual
company
benefit.
eventually ends up screwing all the other companies, though.
Like how
Always
so?
happen. Like
What do you mean?
how so? Like when all the pizza fucking franchises all agree to sell pizzas for $9, and then the next day Domino's decides to start selling their pizza for $7 to undercut everybody, and you go, but hey, we had an agreement, and Domino's says, "Fuck you, it's magic."
But that's good. That's some cartel breaking. That's what you want to happen, right?
But the point being that the entire premise was based upon all of these companies met, and they had a unified agreement, and none of them will ever break that agreement because somehow it's not profitable when you're not countering.
But it's not a
the fact
cartel,
that the
right?
more market share I have, the more power I have. The more market share, the more power, the more I get to dictate price and availability throughout the rest of the market around the entire globe.
It has nothing to do with
And that
market share,
power
though.
translates to
Like
more
they don't have a product unless they come together and agree to work together. Like they need to cooperate for either of them to have any product to sell. That's their incentive to do it. Just like Mac and PC have to get together and agree on technical protocols for either of their computers to work. So it's not like one of them can defect from that agreement and beat the other company. If either of them defects, then they're both just screwed because neither of their things work. They don't talk to each other. Same with the rights enforcement agencies. They have to cooperate for either of them to have any valuable product.
Okay. Let me take this another round. Okay. Organized crime. Oddly enough, it's a lot like government and it's a lot like capitalism. Okay. So let's say back in the New York in, I don't know, the 70s and the 80s, when I lived in New York, and I actually have historical context of what I'm talking about here, there were X number of crime families. And all those crime families had resources, had money, had revenue, had people, had additional goons and enforcers they hired, and they would all come together and sit around a table and go, I'm okay with this. Okay, I'm okay with this. And then everybody makes a deal, so everything's fine. Now, according to your system, there would be no impetus for anybody to break any portion of that deal because somehow it wouldn't be good or profitable. And yet, unless I'm wrong, I believe like 2 motherfuckers killed all the other motherfuckers and took all their shit.
Sorry, what was the example again? Like who
Crime
specifically?
families in the 80s.
Okay,
Crime
so
families.
those are organized crime. So these are people who are basically operating in black markets created by the legal system that's on top of it.
But I'm saying if you again, I'm using it as the example, not a direct one-to-one correlation. Okay, so but you're talking about private entities, a bunch of private entities, all of whom have their own resources, their own money, their own armed security forces, and they've all come together and made mutual agreements on whose territory is whom, what should be the modus operandi for working or not working in each other's private property spaces. And that is exactly the same thing as Ancapistan. Like, it's a whole bunch of individuals. They've all come together. They've essentially agreed on what they're going to do. They all have armed enforcement agencies. They all have contracts. They all have agreements. They all have resources. They all have properties. They all have zones of control. Can you agree that this is essentially what you're talking about in a basic and capitalist setup? Is this?
I mean, I think one important difference is that the mafia is I'd say, let's call it a strong selection bias. I mean, this is an organization that is only going to deliberately can only involve people who are willing to break the law in very serious ways. So it's kind of
but what if they're making their own laws and they're both agreeing? That's my point. Like,
but they're not like actual mafias are breaking the laws, the laws of the state, right?
But again, neither you nor I believe in the power of the state, so we could take the state out of this equation.
Well, I believe that most of the laws that the state enforces, or at least many of the laws that mafias break, are in fact good laws, like don't kill people and don't steal things. So the mafia is only going to, the people who get involved with the mafia, I presume, are kind of like the most despicable people in society, generally speaking. It's not a very fair sampling of human behavior.
I mean, did you not
this is how the mafia
behaves,
so this is how everyone would behave.
Did you not see Goodfellas? Joe Pesci's like he's a national treasure. He's got a winning personality. All those people were nice. They were friendly. They were awesome.
Have you met a lot of real mobsters? They're not as charming as Joe Pesci. unfortunately.
I literally just told you I lived in New York in the 70s and the 80s. Like,
And there are a lot of Joe Pesci's who are just like
I went through Castellano. I went through Temple.
Also, I don't remember
Dawn.
Joe Pesci
We went
being a
through
very
all
nice
that
guy
shit.
in that movie.
He was really nice until that guy told him to get his fucking shine box. You know, and then he made the free market decision to whack a motherfucker.
I don't know. He got pretty triggered when someone called him a clown.
He did. Yeah, now go get your fucking shine box. No. So the point I'm trying to make here, though, is you're talking about a whole bunch of groups. Like, take the government out of it, because we're just talking about like this specific instance. There's a whole bunch of families. They all have property. They all have resources. They all have money. They all have armed goons, and they've all come together to have standard mutual understandings, rules of engagement, modus operandi. These are all things that are essentially agreed upon by all these crime families. And then they all live in relative harmony. You get to do waste management over in Jersey. We get construction in Yonkers. You get truck routes in Brooklyn, like whatever it is. You're essentially talking about a bunch of people with a bunch of properties, a bunch of territories who have their own individual rules, but also come together to have a vaguely unified set of rules, or a rules of engagement, that everybody essentially cooperates in, because that's what you're talking about, cooperation, because there is no centralized government or centralized force which gets to dictate to them. So everything that is done is essentially done like on an agreement, on a community agreement. That's essentially what we're talking about. Like, there wasn't like, some, crime Jesus who would come down and throw lightning bolts at the mobsters until they all like agreed to shit, right? So they all basically came together and they were like this, and this, right? And that's basically like, they all agreed upon it and everything was cool. Similar
Something
to
like
what
that.
you're talking about.
Sure.
And it worked until like two of them back channeled and said, hey, we could literally take both of our people and just wipe everybody out in one shot and end this whole fucking conversation and end this whole stupid thing. And before anybody knows anything, they go and they start ice picking dudes in the back of the head and throwing them in freezer trucks, which is literally what happened, because there used to be like 12 crime families in New York. Then there were 7, then there were 5, then there were 2.
Right.
And they all killed each other.
So like I say, the problem is that, I mean, the mafia is literally selecting for the, this tiny sliver of society who are the people who don't have any, who are willing to, commit fairly heinous crimes, murder and theft and extortion and, pimping or whatever.
Like CEOs.
So the fact that, the mafia, the underground, the mafia economy is not entirely stable doesn't really do much to shake my faith in humanity in general, because it doesn't seem like a very representative sample of humanity. If anything, the fact that those people are able to maintain some degree of stability for some amount of time seems like a testament to that system, to the fact that there can be spontaneous order even with a bunch of like inherent criminal thugs. With the right incentives, they can actually have a sort of functional amount of collaboration without a centralized authority at least for some amount of time.
And I'm agreeing that they can for some amount of time. And then at some point.
Yeah. So, I mean, the fact that it broke down.
People with the most capital and the most power decide that they're going to go take everybody's shit. And then they do. And that's exactly what happened like 4 different times through the 70s and the 80s before it was essentially Gotti against the DEA.
I don't know the specifics in those situations about how, like, what their incentives were, like how they made the decision that is best to assassinate and take out all these other families.
Power. That's why power, because the more. Can
you give me the details?
Yeah. Why would I have 12 crime families who have 12 different small zones where they all control different industries, as opposed to me killing like half the fucking crime families in one shot, then having half the territories, then getting all their people, all their resources, and then being able to generate more income every month, to which I can then hire more goons, to which I can then go kill the last of the other goons.
How were they able to stay stable for so long? Like, why didn't they just immediately all fight each other? I mean, the answer to that is because there is a cost of fighting each other.
Because for a while, It suited everybody's individual needs, so everybody individually agreed to continue going onward until such point as one individual, because again, there's no centralized government, so these are all individuals, until one individual one day, because I don't know, they're human beings and they're greedy, or they're human beings and they're selfish, or they're human beings and they crave power. For whatever reason, it doesn't have to be, because again, you're thinking like, capitalism, logical, this and that. Human beings are far from logical. Their needs, their wants, their desires, their actions, their motives, these are all random and as scattered as, the number of particles in the universe, the number of different SKUs people and personalities have. So at some point, one of these CEOs, much like one mob boss, is going to decide that they want power more than money. It will inevitably happen because it's happened literally every single society throughout the history of humanity. It has happened time and time again, correct?
If they lose that war, then they don't get power. They lose what power they had.
That's right.
So obviously there was a huge risk and a huge cost to declaring war on the other crime families. That's why most of the time doesn't happen. Why it did happen in those specific instances, I don't know. But I would want to see a lot more details about how they came to that decision and what motivated them before deciding that serves as a good as a good experiment for all economic systems, that even ones that aren't underground or operating in black markets and made of criminals, right?
Like it's just occurred.
I don't think that's very representative.
As an example of groups that are coming together that aren't government, because that's essentially, we're trying to make a one-to-one correlation of, if you don't have government, what does it look like when groups of people, come to mutual understandings about all of their power and property and what the rules of engagement are when dealing with each other. And essentially what you're talking about organized crime. I mean, not the crime part, but you're talking about groups of people organizing. That's what you're talking about. The crime part is irrelevant. Let's just say it's organized ponies rather than organized crime, okay?
But it is relevant for this case, because the fact that they're criminals, like, just so I know that you understand what I'm saying and agree, and I'll stop repeating it. But the fact that they're criminals I think is quite relevant in this case, because that's going to skew the people. Like, these are people who want to be in the mafia. They're not good representatives of humanity in general. So I don't think that generalizes.
But I would say that CEOs are not good representatives of humanity either, and you would make the case they are solely based on
they're representatives
what we talked about in the first 10 minutes, subjective morality. Now you're applying subjective morality. You're saying, but a CEO would be infinitely more moral than a crime boss, to which I would tell you a CEO is a crime boss.
I'd have to disagree with you there. I think CEOs are generally more, let's say, pro-social than criminals.
No, they're pro-profit. If being social happens to be the most profitable move at the time, that's what they will do. The last time I checked, a corporation's only responsibility is a fiduciary one to their shareholders and investors. That is their number one priority.
Okay.
Am I wrong?
I mean, the best way to provide profit to their shareholders is to make stuff that people want and sell it. So, successful entrepreneurs tend to be people who are good at making things that people want and selling it to them, which is generally a fairly constructive process compared to, say, the mafia, which tends to make their money by committing crimes like robbing people.
Like CEOs.
CEOs generally are not criminals. They're not.
Really? They don't order chemicals to be dumped rather than taken to a plant because it is more profitable to dump them? You're telling me CEOs don't do that?
I think that CEOs are generally not criminal. Like, you're gonna have to. I mean, you're trying to convince me that all CEOs are criminals or most CEOs are criminals. I mean, first of all, I'm not sure what you mean by criminal, but I think most CEOs try to follow the law. Yeah.
Why? See again, this is now we're getting into subjectivism. Like,
but if you think CEOs don't follow the law now, then why would you care about there not being a law? Apparently, it's not going to make any difference.
Because again, my concern is that is that capitalism and the state are inexorably entwined and that you can't have one without the other. And you're essentially making the argument that you can have capitalism without the state, with capitalism standing as the state. And I'm saying that that's physiologically impossible, because capitalism requires a centralized government, an armed police state to enforce private property rights, and a way to codify and consistently change laws that then get applied to everybody else underneath their dominion. This is what governments do.
So I would say that those are
that
all
a corporation
services.
could do the same thing without a government. And I'm telling you that can't happen.
I would say that all of those things are services that can be provided on competitive markets, just like most of the other services that we consume. The idea that they need to be provided by government, or they need to be a monopoly, is just an understandable misconception, perhaps one that's been sort of promoted by government. I've seen many explanations of how such systems could work, and this seems entirely plausible. And I don't think that they've ever existed, not yet. But the economics of them just seems to suggest that they're perfectly possible. There's just no particular reason that they wouldn't be provided the same way everything else is. You can have an economy that depends on rights which are provided by an industry in that economy. Like, I guess the assumption is that because you need these rights enforcement to have other kinds of exchanges, that the rights enforcement itself can't be just an exchange on a free market. But that just turns out to not be true. You can have a service that provides the rights enforcement for other services. It just seems to work.
Because I don't believe there's neutrality in a system that's solely based on profit.
You don't believe there's neutrality?
You're attributing to the fact you're telling me that, like, and this is the same problem I have with any police state, that essentially human beings are morally garbage, which is why they need to have laws, and then they need to have police to enforce the laws, because if you don't, people will just sink to their lowest trash level and do trash shit. Because there's no. I don't think they're morally garbage. I think people are self-interested. And there's a huge difference, like, because self-interest motivates you to, seek benefits for yourself. It doesn't per se cause you to seek, to make other people miserable for no reason. Wait, but don't you understand? To my benefit, you're talking about myself. The benefit to myself, if I am a capitalist and only a capitalist, and there is no state, the only benefits that come of any of my actions is increasing the amount of resources I have, increasing the amount of profitability I have, and then increasing the amount of power that I have to further manipulate the market to make all the resources I have even more valuable, because I'm a capitalist and my number one priority is profit. Because if my number one priority wasn't a profit, I wouldn't be a capitalist. I would be a fucking socialist. Like, that's the problem.
The profit is made through productivity. Most of the profit that we have is made through people making things, through companies producing things. And in order to produce things, companies have to cooperate with many, many other companies, right? We have these crazy, complicated, elaborate supply chains, lots of companies doing business with each other. So the amount of cooperation that's needed in order to produce things is considerable. There's there's great incentive to do that. You make
hypothetically, couldn't I just take your shit and then make all your people slaves instead of employees? I mean, let me ask you something. From a profitability standpoint, what's more profitable? Me paying 1,000 employees $7 an hour, or me paying 1,000 employees $0 an hour?
Well, obviously, any society that allows people to just take each other's stuff results in a society in which there is no stuff, because people have no reason to make stuff if it's just going to be taken from them. I assume we both agree on that.
Well, no. Technically, if you're the biggest dog with the biggest stockpile of people and armed weapons, then no, that really isn't a consideration.
You think that would be a productive society?
I've worked for feudal England for like 600 years.
Okay,
England managed to take itself out of the morass of the Dark Ages and all the way through a Black Plague with like 3 people ruling 1 million people through force and accumulation of most of the resources. Isn't that what happened? And
so, do you think we could have the kind of society we have today, where we have individual people who are like highly skilled at, like, who are doctors or engineers, scientists and such if we just had this sort of massive like slave society where there was like a king who just told everyone what to do. I suspect we would not be able to advance to the current sort of level of sophistication with that kind of
that was like the first 7,000 years of
it was
society, and yet we still.
But it only got us so far, right? We got pyramids and such, but we didn't get to men on the moon. So I think to get to men on the moon, you have to have a more sophisticated system and less coercive system than that.
Have we really gotten a man on the moon? Just saying.
Oh.
Just saying. No, I'm fucking with you. No.
Well, either that or a very convincing.
Don't make me lose my contract, please.
Either way, it was a fairly impressive accomplishment. So,
Wait,
and I don't think it's one that could be accomplished by a nation of slaves.
Why not?
Because you need to have highly educated and creative, inventive people. You need to have a lot of distributed intelligence. So you have like many people like putting their own effort into individual parts of the economy so that it can work together. And I don't think like a central system that just enslaves everyone and tells everyone what to do can do that. Like no one has any incentive. No slaves have any incentive to do.
I'm sorry, but wait a minute. When slavery was legal throughout most of the world for, I don't know, the better part of 7,000 years, are you telling me that there still wasn't an educated aristocracy, i.e. the owner class?
But there weren't educated slaves.
You don't need educated slaves.
You do. I think if you want the kind of society you have today, you need mass education. And more. You need mass education. You need mass creativity, like people being able to choose what they do and to notice opportunities and be able to take advantage of them without having to go up to some central authority to ask permission.
Yeah, it's called the aristocracy. That's what they did while they owned slaves.
Yeah, and that was a problem. That's why they.
I mean,
you can't just have a small group of elites like running everything.
I'm not arguing pro-slavery. I'm trying to
I know, to
blow holes in the argument before anybody like flips out. Like I'm purposely not looking at chat because I don't want to know what kind of blood sport requests are going on. But like again, this is all because I'm trying to wrap my head around the concept that capitalists can do everything the government can do without the threat of government authority, just through basic cooperation. And again, I think without those threats, that basic cooperation goes away. And you just can't have 12 people sit around a table and agree that they're all going to fucking, treat fairly with each other and follow the same amount of rules until one day, one or two of them come together and whack like half the motherfuckers and take all their stuff. And this has happened time again. It happened with tribes. It happened with mercenary companies. It happened with feudal lords. It happened with robber barons. It happened with capitalists. This has happened time and time again throughout the history of the world. So you can't like treat this like this is some anomaly that just goes away because everybody's a capitalist. Because
in some sense, it's happening now, right? We have this massive state that you and I both agree is not a good thing, and everyone seems to be going along with it. I think, what allows that to happen is partially ideology. It's partially just the fact that we accept it, and we assume that it's sort of legitimate and necessary, and so we don't try to defend ourselves against it. But in a society where most people want cooperation and peace and don't want to have to fight off criminals all the time, as long as the vast majority of people in a society want that, which I think is true of any pretty much any society, then any sort of element that wants to like conquer the society is ultimately going to meet up against a much larger pool of resources fighting against that. And I just don't see how it can happen. I don't see how you can go from a society which is in a situation that's peaceful and put together. You need some critical mass of people to overrun the society. You need most of the people to do that. You'd have to have like this massive civil war. You need
roughly 3% of the populace to overthrow a government. 3%.
Well, what's the other 97% going to do? But they're not overthrowing the government. They're overthrowing the entire society. They have to like literally slaughter everyone. There's no central power for them to attack.
Because that's never happened before?
3% of the society defeats the other 97%.
No, 3% of a society takes over a society, then controls the military, the flow of capital, and controllership of the resources through a centralized power authority.
But doesn't it usually
Use that
happen by
power to
overthrowing
accumulate
an
more power.
existing government that
Well, yeah,
claims to
but
have?
if you go
Okay.
chicken and the egg, you go all the way back. At some point, there was somebody who accumulated more power. Just like if you take capitalism,
Sure.
the labor capital relationship, and you take it all the way back, labor predates capital, i.e., capital needs labor, labor doesn't need capital. It's the same.
But what allowed that to happen, those 3% of people to seize power, is the fact that the power was already centralized with some other 3% of the people. So
Okay.
I want to get rid of that 3%. That's what I'm proposing.
You want to get rid of the 3% of people who want to take power.
Who already have power.
Okay, I call those CEOs.
I call them the
So
state.
if you're down to get rid of CEOs, I'm 100% with you, and then we're on the same page.
Look, like I say, I'm perfectly open to the idea of alternate systems of, let's say, homogenous social norms, the social norms that we all hold each other to. Perhaps those can be improved beyond what we have now. But I just think that's a separate problem to the problem of the state, of having this one organization that isn't held to those norms, right?
Right, but I feel like you're just trying to replace the state with CEOs, in which case...
No, I'm replacing it with replacing the state with people who are held to the same norms as everyone else. And I think that we can have the services that enforce those norms without violating those norms.
Again, I think now you're going into the wishful thinking. Humans really want good stuff, so they'll all be good as long as there's a mutual agreement, to which I would say literally the entirety of the face of the planet has been at war for like 90% of all the time that human beings have walked the face of the planet. And I think that at least 7,000 years of recorded history in humans would show that regardless of what the system is, this is what humans do.
How did we get out of those wars? How do we mostly get out of those wars?
Usually enough people pushed back against the government and said, we're going to vote you out of office if you don't stop blowing people up. And then politicians looked around and decided that their own power and maintaining their power, and thus access to all the resources, was more important than continuing to steal more resources and more power from other people. So they dialed back their greed a little bit and said, hey, look, people, you talked and we listened. Now we're all good, okay? And then the people let them maintain power. So replace that with CEOs, and it's the same shit. The only difference is I can vote out a government official. I can't vote out a CEO.
So people just decided, the citizens just decided one day, hey, we don't want our countries to be at war anymore. And they told the governments to stop, and the governments did.
Yeah, do I need to take the anti-war movement of the 1970s through Vietnam? Why the hell do you think that stopped? It stopped through war fatigue, which was society, the majority of society finally pushed back against the government and said, enough of us are now here that if you do not stop doing this, we will vote you out of office and strip you of your power that you so desperately crave. If those were CEOs,
why were governments able
to strip your power? And the CEO would say, and that's
why were governments able to convince people to have those wars for so long?
They didn't have to convince people to have wars. They just declared a war.
But you're saying that the war stopped when people told the governments to stop.
No. I thought you said start. I'm like, it's not like there's a public referendum that they hold to decide if the government is going to declare war.
No, but you think the general force that resulted in sort of the decline of war was the displeasure of the citizens of the countries?
Yes,
and the local pressure.
It was threatening people in a position of power to remove them from their position of power. That is the first, last, and only reason that has happened. And if you swap out president with CEO, then you have the same exact thing, only you have no instrument with which to vote that CEO out of office. Only the people in the board of directors of that corporation do. So that's the difference. When you're talking about a president or somebody who can sign articles of war, there's 120 million people who get to vote for the person who gets to sign articles of war. If you're a CEO and your board of directors is 12 people, but your company services the entire world, only those 12 people get to vote on the CEO, not the rest of the world. So what you're talking about is the concentration of power. And there's more concentration of power in capitalism than there is in government, because in government, at least it has to be responsive to the direct will of people. Capitalism doesn't, because capitalism can corner a market and force the market to subjugate people's choices.
I think power is much more concentrated in government. But I mean, do you not think that that countries trading with each other had some effect in preventing them from going to war with each other?
I think, okay, I will concede that over centuries and eons or whatever, most of the times of peace that you have had, either in regions or throughout the world, were created because there was prosperity on both ends of a deal. I.e., if we have a deal and I'm making money and you're making money and I'm getting mousses and maple syrup and you're getting mousses and maple syrup and we're all happy with it, that's great. However, in capitalism, profit is still the motive. And if I'm really happy with the deal and you're really happy with the deal, well, one of those capitalists are going to realize they left a lot of meat on that bone. And they're going to go back for more because, again, they're capitalists and their prime consideration is profitability, not the well-being of humanity, not the morality of situations, profit. That's why it's called capitalism. You are investing your capital to derive more capital.
Isn't everyone's, like, when you say profit, are you talking about just general, like acquiring of wealth, or is profit a more specific thing as you're using it?
Profit is garnered by using your resources to generate more resources, to acquire more resources. So if you are not profitable,
to generate or acquire,
you will have fewer resources. If you are profitable, you will then be in a position to obtain more resources and thus garner more market share. Is that not basic capitalism?
I mean, so it seems like every person, every human being fundamentally wants to profit. They want more stuff.
Is a curd.
I mean, is that, do you see that as variable? Like, is there some sort of system that makes people not want to be wealthy, not want to have stuff?
Is there something that makes people not want to have more stuff or have stuff? Because again, capitalism,
more stuff
requires a constant desire and a constant quest for more stuff. There is never enough stuff in capitalism. If I have 5, I can make 7. If I have 7, I can make 12. If I got 12, I can get 100. If I got 100, I can just have every single one of these motherfuckers in the whole damn world. Because capitalism insists on constant growth and constant profitability. Without constant growth, capitalism contracts. Without constant profitability, a corporation implodes. So it needs growth.
But how does capitalism insist on that? Like, how does capitalism create the incentive in people to continually become more wealthy?
It's basic. We were just discussing this before. This is basic human nature.
But if it's basic human nature, then I wouldn't say that capitalism creates it. I'd say that it's just human nature. It's just something.
No, capitalism just gives an efficacious system for more people to do it. However, the problem with finite growth with limited resources means that you will be taking more resources from people who have little and giving them to people who have more. You're literally creating.
But most of our growth comes from production, from creating things. Like, we create value.
Yes, from labor.
Well, I mean, labor that creates stuff that we like. Like, we create new wealth.
Right. Capital. No. We don't create new wealth.
Oh, yes,
labor
we do.
Creates,
absolutely.
Labor creates products or services. Capitalists are the one who extract wealth from that process or from that product. Because again, as we have ascertained, if you take the relationship of capital to labor and you go all the way back to the beginning, labor predates capital. Without labor, there was no capital. The first person who accrued capital did so through labor. They labored and accrued capital, then used their capital to purchase more labor, to acquire more resources, to exchange into more capital. Ergo, capital is not required for labor to profit or for labor to produce. Capital demands labor. Without labor, capital is in a fucking useless void of nothingness. Because if you can't purchase labor,
but the opposite is
then
true
you
as
cannot
well.
purchase productivity.
I mean,
Whether-
what can labor
I
do
can-
without capital to make stuff with?
I can go outside to a tree in my backyard, knock off a tree limb. I can
With
fucking whittle that thing down and go sell it for $10.
But you need a tool for that. You need the capital.
I don't
tool
need
is
a tool for
capital.
that. I could use a rock that I pick up.
Well, I guess that's capital too, if it works. But
It's not capital. It's a
Sure.
resource. Resources are not necessarily capital.
well, it's a thing that you're using to make other things. And I thought that's pretty much the definition of
Right.
capital.
That's personal property, not private property. Again,
Well,
personal
so when-
property, you can acquire personal property without expending capital.
So what can you make out of a rock and a tree? Maybe a few
It doesn't-
things, not very
I don't
much. You're
care.
going to
I'll
need
make- I'll
much
make toothpicks.
bigger rocks and more complicated rocks to make more
So what you're
complicated
saying
things.
is, okay, so again, what you're saying is I can use my labor and my resources to create a product. I can then take that product, I can sell it, or I can trade it for another resource, and I can begin to accrue my own capital without external capital investment. Would that be correct?
You could, but
Okay, ergo, capital is not necessary in that equation. If I'm a capitalist and I have $1 billion worth of capital and I have no labor, what can I produce?
but I would call that capital unless you're using a different definition. Like
What do
as
you
far
call
as
it?
I know, capital is anything that you're using for producing other things rather than consuming it, right? So if you made a tool for yourself, I would call that then capital. Is that not the definition you're using?
No, it's personal property. It's something I created. It's mine.
Okay, well,
It's
I
my
mean,
personal property.
then I guess we disagree about the definition, but I don't want to get hung up on
This was
definitions.
why I wanted to go into definitions earlier. See, this is
I mean, that's the way most economists define capital, right? It's just anything that's used,
Everything
like
is
regardless of who owns it or where it came from, it's just something that's used to make other things rather than something that you consume. So
yeah, but it's a difference between personal property and private property, though. There's a huge difference between personal property and private property.
but don't you define those things in terms of what is capital and what isn't?
No, because capital is anything that I can expend in lieu of labor. That's what capital investment is. Oh, okay. I'm going to put in $1 million, and all you million people are going to be put in 10 hours of labor, and this thing is going to be produced. I'm not actually going to labor. I am just going to put in my capital. All the rest of you labor. Then when the product comes out, I get dibs on the profitability of that because I'm the one who invested capital. Is this not how the capitalist production system works?
It can work that way, I think.
Well, how else would it work?
I mean, there's all sorts of arrangements you can have for how to acquire the capital or get created or whatever. I mean, I don't know if I want to go too deep into basically a debate over Marxist economics, which I assume is what we're talking about.
I don't want to get into Marxian economics. I'm just talking about the basic fundamentals of capital, and that you have to expend capital to, if you don't have labor, you have to expend capital to get all the things that you could acquire if you just labored. Am I not wrong here?
I think you're using these terms very differently than
I can go out and I can go fish, or you as a capitalist can go spend $10 and buy a fish.
Mhm.
The fish is not capital.
No, presumably not, because you can eat it.
That's my point. So I
The
do not
fishing
have to
rod.
expend. I do not have to expend capital to acquire things. Ergo, if I'm not expending capital to acquire a thing, that thing is not capital, because I cannot take it and use it in lieu of labor to extract wealth from somebody else.
I'm not following you.
I'm kind of surprised on this one. Okay.
Like I think of
Okay.
I think
if
of
you have
basically two
capital-
kinds of goods, right? You've got capital goods, which are used to make other goods, maybe capital goods, and then you've got consumer goods, which are just things that people consume for their enjoyment. And the capital can come from, where capital comes from is, you could make it yourself or you could buy it. Like whether you make it or buy it doesn't seem important to me to how it's defined. And labor, I think of as a kind of resource that you can call it human capital if you like. I mean, the relationship between labor and capital is that, you sometimes need labor. You think of labor as an input, I guess, to production.
Sorry, you sometimes need labor?
Well, I mean, I guess you always need a little bit of labor, but you could have
what are you going to produce
company
with capital and no labor? Tell me what you can produce with capital and zero labor.
You have like a robot that makes everything on its own. I guess you need a
A curd is a curd.
Well, you need a robot. You need someone to make the robot. Eventually, if you go back far enough.
Right. So, ergo, capital requires labor.
Right. Yeah.
Does
so you're saying
labor
that there was
require
labor
capital?
before there was ever capital. I mean, that's true. If you go back far enough, you'll find someone laboring to make the first capital.
So, capital is ancillary.
Ancillary. I mean,
Ancillary. Secondary.
I mean,
not predominantly required.
well, I mean, it's acquired eventually. Like didn't have to come. It didn't come first.
Required, not required. Required.
What?
If I have labor, do I need capital? Yes, or to produce something, anything. Do I need capital if I have labor?
Like there are a few things you could make with just labor and resources, but not much.
And then I could use those things to make more things.
Sure.
Okay. At any point, have I taken any external capital investment, or has somebody else invested capital in lieu of labor to profit from our labor?
Anybody? No. I'm looking. So you could build like an entire sort of chain of production on your own from scratch. Is that what the point you're making?
The point I'm making is that capital is not necessary for labor to produce goods and services. Capital without labor is useless.
Not
Labor without
100% of
capital.
the time, but obviously if you want to produce anything past a certain level of sophistication, you're going to need to make capital, and then the labor uses that capital to make more things, right? You need both.
But
I understand. I'm not sure the point you're trying to make.
Because the point I'm trying to make is that if I'm a laborer, I have a group of laborers, and we construct something, and then we collectively use that something to build something else, and then we use that something to build something else, and then we take that something and we either sell it or trade it or whatever the fuck it is we do with it. At no point did I need a capitalist or their capital investment. Correct?
Sure. You don't need one.
Now, if you're a capitalist and you have no labor, what can you do? If you have capital and no labor, if you cannot
by no labor,
purchase labor,
you mean no one can do anything? If no one is allowed to move a muscle, then I guess you can't do anything.
So in other words, capital requires labor. Labor does not require capital.
Requires for what? Sure, I guess.
Growth. For growth. For progression, for advancement.
Mm-hmm.
Capital with no labor just fucking sits there and does nothing. And the only value it has is the belief that it has value, because it's not doing anything, ergo it's valueless. So the only thing that gives that capital value, if it is not currently being invested to acquire more capital, the only wealth that capital has, the only value that capital has, is your belief in the fact that it has value, since it is currently producing no value because it is not being used to purchase and extract labor.
Okay. I mean, the value is that it can be used to create things. That's why people would pay money for it.
So it is potential value, but not real value. It doesn't have real value.
What's the difference?
Until labor harnesses it. Because
Sure.
this all goes back to the ANCAP argument. This is again what it boggles my mind. Like this is like I always trip up.
Are you just trying to define value?
Value?
Is that the point of
No. I'm not trying to find value at all. I am trying to ascertain the relationship between labor and capital to determine if capitalism is necessary or if it is superfluous. Is that like a fair questioning and a determination to make? Wouldn't that like Don't you?
Which definition of capitalism are we using? This is the one. So is capital? Are you talking about investment specifically, where someone buys capital and hires labor to make stuff with it? And you're saying that's not necessary?
We will discuss capital investment in lieu of labor. That's fair. That is a fair.
I gotta stop for a second. I've been offered from the person who has the next segment, which is Bela, to give you guys an extra 30 minutes so she can keep doing homework. Since you guys are still going, do you guys want an extra 30 minutes?
I'd be good if I could take like a $5, but if not, I mean, I'm good, and we can always pick it up another time. Like this,
we are kind of like getting onto a new topic here. Maybe
this conversation has gotten battered around for 1,000 years, so it's not like, you know.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I don't know if we're going to resolve it in 30 minutes.
I don't know, but for me, like
I mean, this is like 101 for me, right? The stuff you're telling me right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but this is the stuff to agree upon, and this is my you know, if we're talking about is the ANCAP ideology, is the libertarian ideology, is it a valid one? Is it one that can be mass proliferated? Is it one that could you know, become a thing, hypothetically? So if you want to determine that, you have to determine, number one, if you can have a stateless existence, and number two, if you have a stateless existence, can capitalism exist, thrive, and push humanity and or society forward just as capital and capitalists with no form of centralized government? Because that is essentially what the ANCAP libertarian ideology is. It's that you can advance society through capital with no government. Is that
okay? Well, let me just say that, I mean, my assertion that a stateless society works is just based on what we already know from the amount of stateless stuff we have in our society right now. We have a society in which most industries work mostly without the state, other than providing these basic rights enforcement. And I'm not basing this on any sort of fundamental change in human nature or any change in the structure of capitalism. I think that capitalism isn't inherently, we have some degree of capitalism right now, and I'm not positing any kind of novel way of restructuring society in order. I'm just saying that the way we run other industries right now can be used to run the industries that government currently claims they need a monopoly over. That just isn't true. So it's not.
But I'm not the one who's a fan of. I'm not, you know, standing for the state either. But the differentiation here is that you believe that the state can be that the state's functionality can be replaced by capitalism and capitalists.
Mm-hmm.
That's your essential positive theory, right?
Right. And that implicit in that is my claim that capitalism right now works pretty well, at least compared to the state. But maybe you disagree with that, and that's probably where we're going to get stuck.
Yeah.
If you right now are very critical of capitalism and think it's failing, then I guess you're probably not going to agree that you can just hand over these new industries to it and it'll work.
Well, I've always been anti-capitalist, and now it's taken all of 3 weeks for capitalism to go mask off and show that it is a complete failure, and the only thing that can prop capitalism up is the state. Because without the state constantly propping up capitalism would have imploded, I don't know, 96, 2000, 2008, 2012, 2020, just in our lifetime alone, that every single time, if the state has not rescued capitalism would have imploded into a tiny little pool of fetid feces.
Well, I'm definitely not convinced of that the state is actually saving capitalism rather than screwing it over. And even if it is doing something to save it, I'm not convinced that those things need to be done by the state. Just like I'm not convinced that law enforcement needs to be done by the state. It seems like there's, I have to understand some particular reason those things have to be done by the state. But again, that is a whole other topic, whole other rabbit hole that we probably don't want to go down at this point.
I mean, but this is the basic positive theory though that we're talking about is that you could essentially run society the way it is now, only replace government with capitalists. Replace government officials with CEOs.
With free markets, yeah.
And that everything will work at least as well, if not better.
Considerably better.
To which I say the only thing that would make government worse is fucking making it less accountable to people and replacing politicians with CEOs. It's the only way that you could take something that is fetid and crappy and somehow make it worse is to add capitalism to it.
I think we have ample evidence that capitalism works, that free markets, to be clear, work much better than government at satisfying our preferences and at holding people accountable through the fact that people are paying for the things that people are paying for things. People are paying their own costs, and there's very little moral hazard. Whereas government is this huge cesspool of moral hazard.
Right, but
The laws,
capitalism
the legal
needs the
system that we have
government.
now is allowed to do horrible things like throw pot smokers in jail and have these massively complicated laws that no one even understands, and we're constantly breaking laws every day because we're forced to pay for the system, and we can't choose an alternative. We can't say, I don't like these laws, I'm going to choose another one, or I don't like these cops, I'm going to hire a different one. If we actually had to pay for the cost of throwing drug users in jail and enforcing all these terrible laws that we don't like, we wouldn't pay for it. And in a system where you have to pay for it, those laws wouldn't exist because
I'm not
sellable
arguing
products.
for the state, though. I'm not arguing for the state. You're arguing that the state can be replaced by capitalists and that it's still the state. I'm arguing that the state is an utter pile of crap.
Not a state.
Why? Because you call it a corporation instead of a state, and you call it
because it's not a monopoly. Because it's not a monopoly.
You have a monopoly on power, and you can't be voted out. That's literally what a monopoly is.
There's no monopoly in the system I'm talking about. It's a market for law enforcement. You can have multiple companies providing all of the services. No company has the right or the means to say we are the only company allowed to do this, as the state currently does.
The state is now, granted, they don't do a very good job of it because, they allow capitalists to lobby them and influence them with more capital because, again, that's what capitalists do. They use their capital to influence whatever system to make the system
that's what anyone does.
as possible for themselves. No, that's not what anybody does. That's right. That's what wealthy people
and not
do.
all of them, just
people who are people who are obsessed with accruing capital will go out of their way to alter the system to accrue more capital because capitalists are going to capitalist. That's what capitalists do. Profit over everything else. You just masked off there for like 3 seconds and said it.
I mean, I think they certainly there is a degree of cronyism that goes on. We have people who do collude with government and influence them in shady ways through money. I think the degree that this actually influences our economy is greatly exaggerated. The most successful businesses, the richest people generally get that way, not through influencing government. They get that way through plain old-fashioned making great products and selling them very successfully. And
what is the most profitable company in America right now?
I'm just guessing, but maybe
what company
Apple
has the most revenue would be better. What company generates
probably
the most
like
revenue, generates
Apple
the most
or
capital?
Amazon, Facebook, or something. I don't know.
You mean Amazon, the one that was publicly subsidized for 22 consecutive years by the government? But you just told me capitalism doesn't require the government.
How are they subsidized? I don't know about I don't have Amazon's financial papers with me, so I don't know if we can get into this debate here. But
Amazon has gotten hundreds of billions of dollars in specific tax breaks only to themselves, in subsidies to themselves. They are given an unfair advantage by their relationship with the state because the most successful capitalists use the state to help them generate more revenue.
Okay. I would say that do you think if Amazon had not been helped by the state at all, that they wouldn't exist today? Like we wouldn't be this massively popular?
Correct.
Okay. I mean, I find that claim pretty extraordinary. I don't know how to disprove it, but it seems like Amazon does make something very valuable that is very popular that people really like.
This with a question. No, Amazon actually doesn't make anything. Amazon provides a service. They manufacture nothing. They produce nothing. They merely offer a service.
Sure.
So number one.
A very valuable service.
Right. But yeah, it's called mailing shit. Yeah. Yeah. We have numerous corporations that have been doing that for decades. Amazon ran on a loss for 22 consecutive years. The only reason they were still standing was because the government subsidized them. Ergo, Amazon could not have grown to this size by taking all their revenue and reinvesting it in themselves if they actually had to turn a profit. Instead, all that money that they took into investing themselves and scaling artificially, they would not have been able to do because they wouldn't have had the money that they extracted from the government.
So Amazon didn't get any private investment. They raised all their capital from government subsidies to survive for all those years.
Yes, they had
No
two
profit.
rounds of capital funding like 20 years ago. Yes. And then the government subsidized the shit out of them to the tune of hundreds
Where
of
did these subsidies,
billions
which subsidies
of
were these?
dollars. Do you want All right. Hang on. I'll give
We
you
don't
the
have to
list.
get into this.
No. You asked, so now I'm going to tell you. That's fair, right? You asked me a question. I'm going to provide an answer for you.
If you want.
I mean, I don't want, you
Occurred
won't. That's why
is
you
occurred.
asked. Let's see. Amazon will get $4.6 billion in state and local subsidies for its new headquarters alone. Hey, let's check that out. $4.6 billion. Good Lord. $4.6 billion in subsidies just for one fucking building. That's crazy. I wonder how much subsidies they got just in Seattle. Let's check. Amazon total subsidies, Seattle. Let's check.
And that paid,
Let's see how
so all these subsidies like literally paid for the company for years and years and years. That's all, they got all their money from that.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, like, I have to take your word for it. The reason I say we don't have to debate is because I'm not prepared for this debate at all. So I'm just going to be asking you these basic questions.
Okay. No, that's fair. And I'm looking them up.
Which
'cause
seems
I
like
couldn't
a
give you
waste
exact
of your
numbers
time,
either,
so.
But the point being that even the most successful companies in the world that you would hold up as like a paragon of capitalism all required their incestuous relationship with the state.
Yeah, I'm very, very skeptical about that.
You could be
Because it
skeptical
seems like
if
the
you want.
successful companies are strongly correlated with actually making really valuable products that and services that people really like and really want to spend money on. So that seems to indicate to me that it has a lot more to do with they're actually producing things rather than being subsidized by the state.
So let me ask you, does Apple end up with such a large market share if the government equally subsidizes all companies that make computers? Then does Apple still run away with it? Because Apple got the majority.
I mean, Apple's stuff is better.
Subsidies.
They make better stuff.
And they also
Like, it's
charge
not-
more.
Yeah.
So they have a higher barrier of entry, which means
They
they
make
can
premium
actually sell
products.
products to fewer people. I wonder how you can accrue more capital and more profitability by selling fewer units to fewer people. Oh, wait, it's tax incentives and subsidies, which drive down your operational cost, which makes your product more profitable.
If you make premium products and sell them at a premium, then you'll make more. Then you could potentially make more money. I assume that's how they do it. They also have many different products in many different markets. They have products that were one of a kind when they came out, so there were no cheaper competitors, right? There were no cheaper competitors to the iPhone when it came out.
Oh, wait. So you're talking about when you file a patent with the government, and then the government protects your patent to ensure that you still have a monopoly on that product?
I mean, the iPhone wasn't patented. That's why they got.
I'm sorry, the
iPhone's
iPhone wasn't
everything.
patented?
I mean, they had.
Oh, no. You said that. Hang on. How many?
They had
patents
iPhone
did-
competitors out. I'm sure they had
Yeah.
patented stuff in the iPhone, but people clearly, like, Android phones came out that were clearly had all the primary features of the iPhone.
Wow, that's a ludicrous amount of patents. Wow, you'd almost think the government made sure that nobody could make anything even fucking similar to the things in
Oh
iPhone
yeah,
had.
I mean the patent system is
Wow.
royally fucked up in America. For sure.
63 patents. 63 patents on one phone. It's almost like the government is just granting
I'm surprised it's that few.
specific people and specific corporations a wide swath of production and no competition relative to them by granting them patents. If there was no government, would there be patents?
Good question. I don't know. Intellectual property is kind of tricky. I'd say there would probably be, in order for IP to happen, you would have to likely, I mean, the short answer is likely you'd have less extensive IP, but you might have some. You might at least have things like copyright, but you probably have less IP protection.
So then there would be more companies that could produce more products that are more similar to Apple, i.e. driving down Apple's market share. Therefore,
Yeah,
if not
almost
for the
certainly you'd have.
intrusion of government into the patent and licensing project, Apple would have a smaller market share and would have less profitability,
Perhaps.
i.e. governments stabilize and validate capitalism.
Sure, but I think Apple would be successful without all that stuff. Like, I don't think it's like the linchpin for them. I think overwhelmingly the biggest factor that makes Apple successful is the fact that they make this great stuff. And perhaps they'd be slightly less successful if they didn't have these, government subsidies or patent protection or whatnot. But I don't think that would make the difference between Apple existing or not existing.
No, I think it would be the difference between them being a $12 billion company and a $2 billion company. And
Sure.
correct me if I'm wrong, but in capitalism, a $2 billion company is worth about $10 billion less than a $12 billion company.
Okay, I mean, that sounds a bit much to me, but sure, fine. The point is, I think Apple would be able to make the same kind of things, and we'd be able to buy them. Like, I don't see why government is necessary for Apple to exist. Maybe they've helped them.
I didn't say it's necessary for Apple to exist. I said it's necessary
because if the government's helping their competitors, then wouldn't it be counterproductive? Like, I mean,
well, no, because then you're getting.
I suspect Apple would actually make more money without the government, but this is.
You think Apple would make more money without government subsidies, government contracts, and government patents?
Well, they weren't paying taxes.
The amount of competition that they can have.
I mean, they weren't paying taxes. They weren't overregulated. They weren't.
But everybody pays the same amount of taxes. All those corporations pay the same amount of taxes, right?
Well, they pay some.
But they all pay the same percentage. Would that be correct? The same base percentage?
Well, the effective final rate? No, there's going to be different rates depending on.
Some companies can use their capital to lobby the government to charge them less than they charge other corporations. Would that not be correct?
Okay. Like, I'm not sure what you're arguing for here.
What I'm telling you again is that capitalism requires government. Government and capitalism are incestually and invariably intertwined.
But I mean, if there's no government, then Apple doesn't need to lobby for tax breaks because there's no taxes. They don't have to pay them in the first place. They don't, I just reject the idea that Apple couldn't exist without patents.
I didn't say Apple couldn't exist. I said Apple would be
or without subsidies. I think the thing that makes
less profitable. I did not say it wouldn't exist. I said it would be less profitable. Are you going to make the argument that Apple would be more profitable?
Like, I'll give you that's plausible,
protection,
but I think that generally companies would be more profitable without the government. Perhaps there are some companies that manage to take advantage of government so much that they would actually be less profitable without it. But I'm fine with that because I don't like companies taking advantage of the government to become profitable. That's terrible. That's one of the reasons I'd rather get rid of the government, I'm sure.
That's why I'd rather get rid of the government and corporations, because corporations are just a government without the ability to vote them out of power.
No, I think they're nothing like the government. But we're kind of going around in circles here. And
well, of course, this debate always ends up in this circle, but now at least we can say we had it. And number one, I can say that I had a rational conversation without losing my shit and yelling at people. Yeah, VOD that people. That crap happened. Okay, I went 2 hours of that yelling at somebody. I don't want to hear that I'm the angry dude anymore, okay? 2 hours.
I mean, to be fair, like last username, he raged out pretty hard in this debate. He basically was like close to ripping your head off.
I raised my eyebrows like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, I was insane, actually. I got a little frightened. I had to get up and leave the room because I was so scared. But I really enjoyed this conversation. I didn't really have to intervene much. I didn't actually have to intervene like at all. You guys explained your concepts pretty well. I think that you both were good advocates for what you believed in. I respect both of you a lot, and I think this was a really nice conversation, and it went on even longer than expected.
We can have like a 30-second closing statement.
30-minute closing statement.
There's a particular book that I want to plug because it's the source of a lot of the ideas I'm talking about. Do you want to go first?
No, man, hit it. Hit it. You want the 30 seconds? Go for it. I'm not gonna dip in on you.
So there's a famous anarcho-capitalist named David Friedman, who is my greatest inspiration. I think he's an interesting, brilliant guy, and most of the ideas are derived somewhat from him. And this is a book. It's called Machinery of Freedom. It's an excellent book, and if you have any trouble understanding the ideas I'm talking about, put it in my chat. And Dylan's, I don't have yours open, ActTV.
It's twitch.tv/ActDotTV.
Hey, Act, are you streaming?
I don't know about my Discord. I might no, and if I was, nobody would know anyway because we're still,
Yeah, I was about to be like, wait, I even purposely like went through my entire list to see if you're streaming or not. I was like, oh
I didn't
damn.
bother streaming because even when we stream, we're not there, and all it's going to do is keep dragging down my average Andy number, which is going to keep dragging us further from partner, which
Gotcha.
Twitch is already doing a really good job of by de-indexing our page and making it invisible for 14 consecutive days. So I don't really need to add to that. No.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess my my close would be that if you're looking for a good book, you should read anything by Adam Smith. Adam Smith was an economist, an economic philosopher, and somebody who became known as the first ever political economist. And the reason why he was called a political economist is because capitalism cannot exist without the government. And if you don't believe me, go look at the father of capitalism, who wrote 48 books about capitalism and was named the first father of political capitalism. There you go.
There's
that's
two
my
closing
close.
statements. I had a wonderful time. It was a really good conversation. A lot of people seemed to enjoy it a lot. I did not expect the reception it got, but I'm very pleased to say it was a really positive reception. And I just want to thank you both again. And I hope I can either come on your show in the future or you can come back next time if I have an invitation open for you.
Well, shit, Dylan, you know where I am. You always come by my crib. You know how to find me.
Yeah, I sometimes slink over there and put up with you every once in a while.
You do.
Yeah.
You slide in there every once in a while. I catch it, but
And-
unless I got a guest, you could always come roll on. You know that.
Yeah, and sometimes I see last username using some like weird cryptic code called like math in like some of his games. So I come over there sometimes too. I had a wonderful time, and thank you both for coming on.
Cheers, brother. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I enjoyed it too. Thanks for